Hi, good morning. First, I want to just thank you for that amazing goal of the 61,000. Just 3 short years ago, me and my daughter would have accounted for 2 of those. So now I get to share with you my story. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in Monmouth County. I lived with my grandmother. I first lived with my mother, who abused me with her husband. My father was an alcoholic. I just grew up in a very dysfunctional home. I moved in with my aunt at 12 years old, who told me that I was nothing but a pretty face and I should use that while I could. So I became pregnant at 16. My daughter's father was a drug dealer, so that was my first exposure to drugs. I moved out. I was working at Circuit City. Things were going pretty well until Circuit City went out of business. I lost my job and my home. I asked my daughter's father if he could take her for a little while so I could figure out what to do, and he got custody of her. I couldn't deal with all of the pain that I had kind of stuffed down growing up, and then having my child taken was just too much. I'm one of 7, and 6 of us were heroin addicts. So I did what my family did to numb the pain, and I thought I could try heroin one time to just escape the pain. But heroin soon became the pain that I could not escape. I went down a path of addiction, which I tried rehab and it didn't work. I wound up in New York City because being homeless in New Jersey doesn't have as much resources as New York City. I went on the methadone program, and that's when I first met God at the bus. New York City Relief was parked just a block away from the program I was at. I met Juan Galloway, who you guys had the privilege of hearing from a couple weeks ago, and he prayed with me. He would not leave me alone. He kept asking me to share my story. I didn't want to be seen, but he saw me. I started building friendships with some of the women there, and I knew that it was different because I had nothing to give, and yet they wanted to know me. They started inviting me to church. At first, I fell asleep in church because being homeless on the streets, church is a safe place to sleep. And then I started to listen, and that's when God started pulling on my heart. I wanted to know more about what the women had that I didn't. I got baptized, and I found out I was pregnant. That day, I decided that I would stop using methadone, and I told my family that I was having a baby. My family was not very supportive at all. So then I told my family at New York City Relief, and they threw me a baby shower. They came alongside me through the whole way. They were the ones that were there the day that my daughter was born. I met the founders of the organization, and they heard a little bit of my story, and they decided to open their home to me and my daughter. At that time, I was in a business school for women, so I decided to finish school before I would leave the shelter and move back into New Jersey. I moved back in February of 2016, and I started working at New York City Relief, which was God's plan all along. Now I'm the development manager. I've been there almost 3 years. God has completely restored so much that has been taken. I, this past summer, just got custody of my 15-year-old again. She just moved back home this September. She started her new school, and she is a youth leader at our church. She started inviting girls from her new school to come to the youth program, so now I drive shuttles of girls every Friday to meet Jesus. And my 5-year-old, she just sings and dances over Jesus. She has such a light. So God has completely changed the trajectory of not just my life, but of my children's lives as well. So it's not just the life that is in front of you. It trickles out for generations. So I thank you for your generosity and your openness to this organization. Thank you.